Welcome to the Feel Worthy podcast. Today I'm joined by a special guest. It is my dad and leadership coach, Steve Worthy. We're diving into what leaders really care about, things like credibility, communication, and self awareness. We talk about the Enneagram test, defining reality for your team, and why being approachable matters just as much as being confident. Whether you lead a team, a business, or an event, this one's full of practical takeaways and personal insight. Let's get into it. Dad, Steve Worthy, all of the above. Welcome to the Feel Worthy podcast. How are you feeling today?
I'm stoked. I've been looking forward to this all week. I can't, I'm beyond words. Well, here, I wanted to give you just a little something to show, how proud I am of you with doing this. And I know you and I have been talking about this for a while, and to see you actually, executing on it, like my heart is full, man. It really is.
Okay, we can't start the podcast with tears.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, I'm glad you're
Yeah.
here. I'm really excited. I think the LinkedIn universe and others are going to be very excited to finally hear this come together. Did you ever think that, well, it's been over 10 years, when I told you I was switching from engineering to hospitality management, that we'd be sitting here today?
Listen to me. No, not at all. Not at all. And for those who don't know, I tell this story, often about Kayla when she was at FSU and she was going for industrial engineering, and I got a call and she said, thinking about changing majors. My background is in business. My undergrad's in accounting, MBA strategic operations. So I was like, she's gonna do something with business. She's gonna do something like, yeah, let's do this. She said, I want to do event planning. And I think I may have fallen out of my chair. And but she presented the perspective on it. This is why she wants to do it. And here we are now. She has an amazing career and amazing following, and then she has this podcast. So no, I wouldn't have thought about it. But once I saw the passion that you had for the industry, and then for people inside of the industry, this all just makes sense.
I trusted my intuition back then, and I wasn't sure exactly where it would lead, but I was like, I just don't think I could do engineering anymore. But it's been pretty cool to see how the journey has unfolded along the way and to be here now. And I'll be sitting here doing this podcast, which also has been a dream on my heart and my mind for the last almost 2 years at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool to see it come to fruition and everything else that's the past has led to. But you started to touch a little bit more about your background. So your MBA, your background in finance and business. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about what the work you're doing now?
No, so founder, CEO of Worthy Retail Global. We do leadership development and training exclusively for retail leaders and their teams. And then recently we've started to work with companies that are outside of the retail industry. I call them retail adjacent, and they're trying to focus in on learning how to maneuver their product or their service within the retail space. And so we've slowly been sliding over to that area. And it's just been amazing. It's been something that when you think about your business or you think about what you want to do, sometimes you have this, your strategic plan. And I think about 2 or 3 years ago, I said, you know what, I'm going to just allow the market to sort of dictate how I move and what are the things that I want to fall into. And since I've sort of let go, things have really just been falling into place. My retail career started a long, long time ago. I was getting out of accounting. I got my undergrad in accounting, and I started at Arthur Andersen, and I couldn't stand it. I hated it. It was just the bane of my existence. And then I fell into this opportunity with coffee, and I started my retail career at coffee, and I started one of my first businesses, Chessboard Cafe, based off of the coffee industry, where I was actually helping churches buy and sell coffee in their lobbies. And from there, my pastor of my church actually asked me to teach a class on entrepreneurship, me and my friend Jerry. And so Jerry and I actually just started teaching this entrepreneurial class. And that thing led into something just amazing, where I started coaching founders offline about their business. This is when you actually needed a business plan. Nowadays, you don't need a business plan. So this is early 2000s. And then Jerry and I, we actually turned our thoughts into our first podcast. So our podcast was for husbands by husbands. And so we were on this entrepreneurial journey, and we had other husbands who were on that same journey. And we were like, well, let's just talk to them. And so that's what we did. We did that for about 7, almost 10 years, almost 8 years with that podcast. And then our career started to grow. Then we just kind of left it. And now I'm doing what I need to do here with Worthy Retails. I left my executive roles within retail about almost 3.5 years ago. And I've just been loving what I've been doing.
Love the journey, and it also seems like you also followed your heart too and intuition of hating counting, and I
Yeah.
think you get into these roles because I feel like going into college, you're told that the top 3 paths are business, being a lawyer, a doctor, and there's not a lot of space to figure out anything outside of that, so you're like, "This is what I'm
Right.
going to do," and then later on, you realize, "Wait, there's a whole world of job opportunities and different industries that you can go into," and then one thing leads to the other. But it also sounds like you've had quite the journey. What does feeling worthy mean to you in this season of life now that you're where you are today?
Wow. Yeah, it is really operating in I feel I'm operating in my gifting. I feel that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Within when I was doing my retail career, I often found people coming to me asking for questions, asking for direction and guidance. And I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have mentors, to have the same Coach Perry for like the last 6 years or so. And I've always been a fan of coaching and mentoring and all those things. So I've been very fortunate to have those people in my life. And so for me, it's just been a matter of how do I continue to give back with my knowledge, wisdom, experiences, all of those things to help people move forward, right? To help them grow. And so right now in my current phase, it's just a matter of continuing to pay attention to my mind, where I'm at, the surroundings and what the people around me need so I can continue to, help them move forward, help them grow.
And I think that's a dream, and someone on an earlier episode has mentioned this too, where they feel that truly feeling worthy and leaning into their purpose is what it's all about, and I also would just want that for everyone else, right? We
Yeah.
like we talked about with careers, you kind of get stuck sometimes in places that you think you have to be in, but if you can get to the place where your 9 to 5 match your 5 to 9 and all of it balances, and you're doing exactly what's on your heart, then that's the ultimate gift, and I think that's what we
Yeah.
all aspire to have one day or today, like yourself.
Yeah. And also I think people this is one of the things that I've been seeing a lot, and I've been able to help people a lot in understanding. Because a lot of times what we do on a daily basis, we tend to take for granted. And I'll give you a great example of this is that when I was moving into the coffee industry, I was in a Caribou Coffee, and I was talking to the manager, and she's like, well, you need to meet my manager. I met him, and he said, how long are you going to be in town for? I said, only a couple of weeks. I was actually visiting in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. And I ended up meeting his boss. We ended up playing 18 holes of golf, and we are just talking about my military career, education, all these different things. And then after that, he offered me a job to be a district manager in training. And I was very honest with him and said, I don't know anything about coffee. I don't know anything about coffee. I really don't know anything about retail at this point in my life. And so he continued to articulate all of the different leadership attributes that I had gained over college and my military career, all those different issues and opportunities that I had. And as he was talking about it, he's talking about me. I was like, I think it was 25. I was like, whoa,
Is
I
this the
actually
first
had a
time you're
pretty,
meeting him also?
yeah,
You're having this
yeah, yeah.
wow.
But over the 18 holes, he's asking me all these questions about my military and educational background and other work experience and things like that. And so as once again, he's talking about me, and I was like, "Whew, I didn't realize had all of that experience." And I say that to say is because what we tend to think about our normal 9 to 5 or what we do, we take it for granted. We don't realize that how many lives we're impacting. And so part of as a coach, or my coach and I, we call ourselves coach sultans. We try to help you slow the ball down and see who you really are, because before you can move to something else, you have to understand where you are first. So part of what he did was he helped me slow down and helped me realize that I did have a lot to offer and I still had room to grow. So I think as an individuals, as leaders, we have to make sure that we're not taking what we do on a daily basis for granted, because there's so much value in it.
You bring up a really good point, and wonder if it's really us taking it for granted, or to your just what you just said of, are we slowing down enough to really look at
Mm,
holistically our journey, our trajectory, the things we've learned, the things that we didn't love, but maybe gotten something out of, and being able to really own that and see it for more than what it was. Because sometimes it could be,
mm,
I was just serving coffee, or you were actually strategically placing store merchandising so that you were able to increase sales. But not everyone could do that by themselves, which is why I think the coaches are so important and great leaders are so important. But I want to switch into something we both love
mhm,
too,
mm.
and also stems into us kind of learning more about ourselves. So we're both
Ted
big on
Lasso?
the Enneagram.
Ted Lasso?
My gosh, Ted
Oh, I
Lasso,
thought
where
you
does
oh, I
he
thought you
think?
were gonna talk about Ted Lasso. My bad. My bad. Go
I mean, we
ahead.
can. That'll be a whole rant and episode. We totally can. But
Yeah.
before we go to Ted Lasso, I want to go to
Yeah.
Enneagram.
Mm.
And as much as I protest it, I know deep in my core and my own motivations, I'm a 7, and you are an Enneagram 3. So
Yeah.
for those who don't know what Enneagram is, can you tell us a little bit more about it in your own words?
Yeah. So Enneagram is a personality modeling types. There are nine different types. And those of us who have taken Myers-Briggs, DISC, all those
Yes.
different personality assessments, the Enneagram for me has been one that I've landed on personally, and I actually utilize it in my coaching practice. It's one of the first things that a client will do is to take the Enneagram. And the reason I love the Enneagram is because there's several reasons. One, because it gives you a really good understanding of who you are when you're at your best, but it also gives you a really good understanding of who you are when you're at your worst, when you're not operating at 100%, when certain aspects of life or business hit you. There's a tendency for us to slide down in this sort of mindset that is not optimal for who we are. And the other thing, this is probably the second thing I love about the Enneagram, is because it also gives you a picture of who you are as you grow as a leader. Most personality assessments, I feel, they sort of give you sort of what you do, right? The things that you're capable of doing. I feel the Enneagram gives you a really good perspective of who you are and who you can be from one position to the next, because you're going to continue to grow and maneuver. But I think some of the personality types whatever type you are, or I'm a 3, I've seen it throughout my entire career. When I realized that I was a 3 and I took it, I looked at the back of my career. I was like, oh my gosh, I was such a 3. I was such a 3. Now, it wasn't confirmation bias. It was just that I knew that the attributes of a 3 I leveraged and sometimes I used for bad throughout my entire career. Yeah, I love it. Anybody that's thinking about taking it, go ahead and take it.
I agree, and I think it's great because of the motivations, and one, knowing your deeper motivations as to why you do things, which is I think maybe what you're
Yeah.
getting at with the 3. And you know what does a 3 mean exactly for those who may not know?
Yeah. The three is the achiever. He or she, they are the achiever of the 9 personality types. I hate to sound like this, but this is what it says. Is
I'm the best.
they
I'm amazing.
yeah.
I can feel it already.
I'm just it's what the thing says. They have a good command of the room. They have a big personality. They're able to see a lot of things, and they're very uh they're not it's not conceited. It's like they know who they are as a leader, and they're okay with expressing who they are as a leader, and they're okay with understanding. Also, this is the one thing that I realized that I knew I was a 3 when I realized I was a 3, was that I always had the tendency, the ability to
Mhm.
walk into a room and understand who were the leaders, who were the would-be leaders, and who were the like wannabe leaders within that room. And I could position myself accordingly. However, whatever I wanted to get out of that situation when I was in that room, I was able to position myself accordingly. That's been a skill that I've had since I was I don't know, my early 20s. And it's just been something that I've been able to utilize once again for success right now.
We understand why I wanted to be a 3. I well, I also, for me, it was that achievement mentality, but when I
Yeah.
learned about being a 7, it was as an enthusiast. The title is called The Enthusiast. The motivation there was freedom. and like flexibility. And when you
Hmm.
look at I believe the book you recommended to me was A Road Back to You. Is
Yep.
that
Yep.
accurate?
Yep. That's it.
And it tells you about seven and all of the Enneagram personality types in stress and in kind of a normal state, and then also
Yeah.
in your optimal or the best state that you can be in. So I loved the book because it shares those three different stages so you can really dive deeper into who you are. But I want to touch on what you just said about, or you said previously about it kind of helps you navigate throughout your career. How
Mm.
have you seen it play out I know you look back and you saw, oh, I saw the ways that it helped me and then maybe it didn't in certain aspects.
Mhm.
How have you used it to look forward and then help yourself like strategically position you for new roles or new opportunities?
Yeah, it lets me know what to avoid. It
Mm.
helps me to avoid situations and people that I don't want to be involved with or I don't want to take part of. Being able to, see and read people very quickly, I love that ability and I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't. I really do because I can really spot situations very quickly. And for me, it has been able to help me avoid certain business partnerships, opportunities that may look too good to be true. Being able to see those things before they happen has been great. Now, the other side of that, from an achiever standpoint, is that it's not I guess it is a negative, is that I can push myself very fast and not take other situations probably into consideration as much as I do because I'll say I can figure it out. I can figure it out once I get there. I can work through that. That's not a big deal. And so some certain situations I get too far ahead of where I could have slowed down, right? This is why I loved when I was in my retail world. I always had an HR partner who was who was able to slow me down because my mind was like, "Go, let's figure this thing out." And my HR partners were always like, "Steve," they had to reel me back in. As an entrepreneur, I got you and Cher now to reeling me back in because I can go fast, and sometimes it's not always a good thing to go fast.
But sometimes you need to, so it's just knowing when
Yeah,
to, like, pull the lever and pull it back. So, that's great, and I think the Enneagram test, I mean, wholeheartedly a believer. I've been a believer of all of the personality tests, and this one I agree, it's really rooted in who you are. Have you always been a believer of personality tests?
uh, you know, I guess I have been because they've been a part of my career for so long, right? We did stuff in the military. We did stuff like in undergrad and in grad school. We had some personality stuff, and then yes, I think I've been. Yeah, I won't say a believer, but I understand the value that it can have because some people need structure into understanding who they are. Right. Because the tendency is that when we move into an operation or situation, we will just go off of our personality or who we are, but having sort of this guardrails of your personality, whether it's this Myers-Briggs or something like that, could help center people and help them focus and help them probably potentially move to the next level or understand themselves a lot better. So it it could be go one way, it can go left or it can go right, but I think it's a necessary thing for you to have some understanding of who you are.
Can be used in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
toolkit, especially, like, I assume learning about your team pretty quickly, especially if you're thrusted into a manager position where you
100%.
have now a team that you have to understand and give direction to, but if you know nothing about them, it can help at least give perhaps a starting point, is what I'm thinking. Does that sound a
Oh,
bit accurate?
100%. That's exactly what I used to use. Whenever
Okay.
I'm taking over a new market, one of the first things that I did was look at any personality types, any performance reviews, and then align the two. Any 360 assessments, things along that line. That gives you a lot of good starting point information, but then you have to go in and do your own analysis.
And then pair the 2 I like the idea of pairing the 2 together so you see what has been done historically and, like, where the person perhaps is now.
Mhm.
So, going into leadership and finding great retail leaders, what would you say are the different qualities of a great retail leader that you've seen over
Yeah.
your career?
Approachability, approachability all day long. I mean, that's one of the almost a lost art, that we have now in leadership. And I think the tendency we think about approachability, we think about likability. It's not about being liked. I am not a fan of leaders who say that they want to be liked. It's not, there's leadership is leadership. And we could talk about down the line, but approachability is just that ability to position yourself in a way where with your team, it's not about finding things out. It's about them coming to you with issues. Your approachability is around how do you connect with people verbally, non-verbally, understanding who they are, understanding how you need to communicate with them at a certain level, and when you need to throttle your communication up or down based off of all of that. It's a lot of mental gymnastics, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in a positive way, because approachability, you can't approach everybody the same way, just like you can't lead everybody the same way. And so approachability gives you that ability to understand when you need to shift. I would have leaders who were very analytical. The way that I approached them and talked to them from approachability standpoint was completely different than I had for the people who were super extrovert, right? The communication had to change. I couldn't keep my same communication across the line. And so I think helping people understand the importance in leadership, especially within the retail space, of being approachable is important, because it will help you save time. It'll
Mhm.
help you increase retention, but more importantly, it will increase your capacity as a leader, because the more approachable you are, the more information you're able to take in, and you end up creating more margin in your life and in your leadership. But the most important part of that is that you have to give it back out. Tendency is that we see a lot of leaders are just taking in information to hoard that information. The most important thing that you can do is when you get something, you can give it back out. Find a scenario to utilize whatever it is that you've learned, right? It's not that you're trying to be the big guy and I know all of this. It's not about that. You are just constantly creating more and more room in order to take more things in. What we see now is that leaders don't have any more margin. They're coming up against it. And so, and that's where burnout starts. That's where burnout happens. My job as a leader is to help my leaders have that margin within their lives so that they can be the best that they can, take information, but also give it out.
So many great nuggets there that I want to touch on. So my mind first went to, for the person that is great at working with different stakeholders, how
Mhm.
do they learn to become approachable? Because I do think that approachability, likability could be misconstrued, and it could feel as if that is maybe a waste of time and they should just be able to perhaps approach me. How do you start to gain or learn how to become approachable, especially the further you move up in your career?
Yeah, so it's EQ and also self-awareness. And I think when I think about self-awareness, or anybody who's probably listening, when they think about self-awareness, it's inherent in the name, right? It's self, right? You think about yourself.
Mhm.
But the best leaders that I know, the one and also the one that I try to be is that it's not just about my self-awareness, it's about the self-awareness of all those that are around me and understanding what their needs are. I had this one young lady. She was executive team leader at one of my stores, and she was going up for promotions, and all these everybody would come and talk to me about her. And I said, this is the first thing I would say. It's like she is probably one of the most self-aware leaders that I've ever met. And they'll be like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" Like she just doesn't know. She just doesn't understand herself, but she understands what everybody else needs, and then she will give them according based on their needs. Like she was really good at that. She's a New Yorker too, so maybe has something to do with it, right?
Inherent trait of New Yorkers. I love it.
you know,
You have to have
but
self-awareness. They're walking down the street. So maybe.
come
Anyway,
on.
go ahead.
Exactly. Exactly. But she just had that innate ability to understand her surroundings. And then I think you and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago where I've been really leaning into this thing around self awareness is that leaders give the situation what it calls for, no more, no less. And then you're able to disconnect yourself from that, from the emotional toll. Because when we think about leadership, there's a lot of emotions and relationships that take place. But there are certain situations and certain times where you have to emotionally disconnect yourself from the circumstances. And the best self-aware leaders have that ability to give whatever that situation calls for and then move forward. Because I've been in situations where I've been working with leaders and they become emotionally tied to that conversation that we just had. And guess what they do? They carry that same emotion from the entire day, the entire week. And I'm like, dude, are you not over that? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, that was like 2 weeks ago. Why are you still emotionally tied to that? Right.
Yeah.
So, those are those situations in life that happen that we as leaders have to understand. Give the situation what it calls for. But I think self awareness, not just about yourself, but understanding what the people around you need and when to give it to them.
So true. And it's a really tight balance between one, approachability, likability, but then even that caring about people or caring
Yeah.
about the situation and your teams, and then also pulling back and not caring to the point where you're holding on to it for so long that it's impacting you and how you lead going forward.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think mental gymnastics is probably the best word for it because you're constantly going off and on the balance beam, just trying to make sure that you're moving the ship ahead,
Yeah.
but also
And
keeping
this
all the
is
people
why
on the ship with you.
but this is why we don't have, dare I say, we don't have a lot of great leaders anymore, right? I'm just thinking about, and just in life in general, like, because everyone is right now, what I just spoke about takes work. It
Definitely,
takes
absolutely.
work. It takes time. It takes listening. It takes the fact that you're not always going to be the leader in every situation. Sometimes you have to be led. And these are things that a lot of leaders nowadays don't want to do anymore. They like the title, they want to move fast, right? But you have to be able to slow the ball down. This is one of Andy Shirelli. This is he was one of my supervisors. One of his favorite sayings to me, Steve, you got to slow the ball down, slow the ball down. And it was like, okay, that means I have to slow everything down a little bit to make sure that I'm bringing everybody else along for the ride. Because as a leader, you can tend to go fast, but if you slow the ball down, now other people can catch up with you, and now you can move collectively. But we don't see that a lot anymore, or enough of that example of leaders being able to have the ability to do that. If you're listening to this, I would, if you take anything from the slow the ball down, help people understand where they are, so then that way you guys can move collectively.
In retail, things are moving so
Mm,
fast, and we're gonna get
yeah,
into the holiday conversation soon because it's coming, and that is peak times for especially corporate events, holiday events, but then retail with Black Friday and just the annual sales. How do you slow the ball down in these fast-moving environments? Because it feels like things are happening, the company's growing, the business is going fast. You are expected as a leader to keep up, but if you're saying, "I actually need to slow down to keep up," it feels counterintuitive, and I can imagine
yeah,
to someone telling that to their higher up, "Hey, I need to slow down before I can get to the place you want me to get to," may feel like a threat to their own, perhaps, leadership to that person and what the optics look like to that higher leader. So, in those situations, how do you begin to slow down to then and articulate that to your stakeholders, to your teams, so that you can say it'll actually root in success later on?
yeah. I think one of the best things that any leader can do. So before any decision is made, and I would always tell my team this, is that you have to think, you know, two levels higher, right? You have to understand what your boss wants and what your boss's boss wants. Whether it's from a project, whether it's from an event, whether it's from sales, whatever it is. I say that to say is because how they see things completely different than how you see it, because you're in the trenches and you're the ones that's actually doing it all. They have a more strategic, holistic, perspective. And how do you lead where you are, but also have a better understanding of what your bosses need? You got to ask a lot of questions. You got to ask a lot of really good questions. The best leaders I know ask really great questions. When it comes time for speeding up these holiday seasons, part of that is the planning and preparation prior to. Who do you have? And this is the one that's the most critical. Who do you have on your team? So I'm just going to utilize this from a retail standpoint. Before we get into Q4, in the summer, maybe even before the summer, I'm looking at who are my players going to be in Q4. Can they handle Q4? If not, my training and development happens June, July, August, right? We're getting them up to speed. We're figuring things out. We're making moves accordingly, because when you get into Q4, we don't have time for changes. It's go time. It's go season. And so a lot of the issues that I see is that, and whether from planning or execution standpoint, is you didn't do enough work up front, right? Because that always made my Q4 so much easier. Oh my gosh. I mean, I could walk into a store and I would just be like, oh, look at this. This is beautiful. Because we planned properly. We had the right people in place, right? And I wasn't talking to my boss about, my gosh, we have this issue, we have that, right? No, we planned properly. So while we say slow down, I don't mean maybe slow down in that moment. You always have to think 3, 6 months ahead of what's going to take place. Do you have the right people in place? Do you have the right resources? Because if you don't have the right people, I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter how great your plan is, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Speaking the planning language and music to my ears. Because and I'm sure a lot of the event professional audience in music to their ears because it's one balancing that. We love and I think planning is in our DNA to do that ahead of time. So getting your plan together further out, it's the dream, right? To have the
Mhm,
everything, all
mhm.
stakeholders bought in, the budget aligned to 12 months in advance, just because we know what is going to come ahead in the pipeline. When you're in the trenches, that's not the time to plan. And that's not the time to create new plans. If you really want to be able to execute, I think it's just even getting that bandwidth
Yeah.
3 to 6 months ahead of time and really knowing when you can slow down then to look at the bigger picture. I think
Mhm.
that sometimes can also be somewhat of a challenge, like, you're always going so quickly. Are there any tips or tricks that you do or you days you set to say, like, "This is a specific strategic planning day to get myself prepared for the end of the year?"
Yeah, and I'll give you one tip before that,
Yep.
because I was just literally just talking to someone the other day. We were talking about my coaching business, but we're also talking about the accelerator that I do with
Mhm.
some of these startups. And one of the things that I often say is that you have to know what your specific level of leadership, your style of leadership, what problem do you specifically solve, right? And we can go back to the Enneagram, all those different things. But as a leader, you have a specific bent, a specific thing that people always kind of coming to you for. You have a specific personality type and how you like to see things, how you like to do things. When you see external factors that are coming in that could upset that, or you can see external factors that are coming in that's going to elevate that. You have to understand what your specific style of leadership solves. And once you're able to do that and understand that, now you know how to communicate upstream to your bosses, because your bosses have a good understanding of who you are and your attributes and what you can deliver. I think that's first and foremost. And that takes time. That takes some realistic, probably coaching from you with some of the event planners to help them understand who they are and what problem they solve. From a daily planning standpoint, you already know this about me. I'm an early morning person. And I never forced my team to be, but I operate better like 5 a.m. in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. My brain is locked in. And a lot of my planning happened then. And then I would send out that information and then we would meet and then have a conversation on that. I think once again, you have to find your optimal time for understanding who you are in your body and then what your team may need. But I am not an advocate for weekends, right? Your weekends are your weekends. You can pick a specific day of the week, Mondays or whatever, but you need to know your optimal time for getting the most out of yourself too.
It's clear, it's quiet,
Yes,
but it's also doing the work for yourself. So whether it's Enneagram, whether it's just carving out time on a day off to journal, but making the time so that you're actually able to really hone in on how you operate best. I know it's cliche, but, like, you have to fill your cup, you have to do the things in your optimal space
100%.
before you can give back to your team, because it is a lot. Like, it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of other people's emotions and their schedules and their lives that are coming into you, especially if you're managing a big team. So to be able to even pour into them, you have to set the time to have a vision and cast the
Yeah.
vision and even create it, right? Because that takes time. I mean, maybe it comes to you in a dream, but maybe you also need some whiteboard work and then be able to map it out so that it's clear for everyone else you disseminate it to.
You said something though. You just said something
Yeah,
about the emotional load of other people.
absolutely.
And I think a lot of leaders, they don't understand um I think rudimentary. You understand like that there are different people. They have different emotions, and they're going to be bringing those things to play within the circumstance, within the business, and things like that. And I think the tendency is that we feel that we have to, that those people have to adjust their emotional output, based on your leadership or based on the circumstances. Now, I say that I think there are moments in time where as a leader, yes, you coming into a situation, your team's emotional baggage, if you will, they're going to have to do some adjustments to that. But as a leader, I often felt that it was important for me to understand the emotional baggage that my team is bringing into the situation. And here's why. And this is once again, this requires work and time. It's because you're not just a leader at work. You're not. I'll put it to you this way: when every time I'm coaching somebody and they do the Enneagram, and if they have a partner, they have a husband or a wife, I often tell them, "Hey, have that person read the Enneagram too." And I can't tell you how many times when they said that, when they did that, they come back to me and say, "Steve, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did this." The reason I do that, I do it that way is because that person is along for the same journey as you are. So as you're changing as a leader, your spouse is seeing you change. They need to understand how they can help you change or understand the changes that are taking place. Put that into the same scenario with your team, right? I had to understand what they were going through personally in certain situations. If we had that level of approachability that they were able to share, I'm not taking on their mental load or their emotional baggage. I'm just understanding. And now I can provide a little bit more relationship. Our level of relationship is a lot better because now I've listened. I'm able to take it on. They don't expect me to solve it, but they expect me to understand. So you have to pick and choose those situations in which you do that. But I think that it's important for you to understand at some level the emotional side of what people are bringing. You don't have to articulate it. If they're a jerk all the time, they're going to be a jerk, right? If they're this type of way, then it is what it is. But I think you have to, at some measure, help have an understanding of who they are and what their emotional issues are.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for the conversation, but as a person who has had leaders that understand that, it at least helped me feel seen and understood and at least provided this level of relationship where I could say, this is what's happening. And they
Yeah.
immediately understood. They didn't have, like you said, they didn't have to solve it for me. But for a situation that I just thought of, when I first had my son, it was about 6, 8 months. And all of a sudden, he had, like, developed a rash or something to
Yeah.
that effect. I just remembered I felt panicked, and I needed
Mhm.
to leave a site visit to drive back home. So we were in Orlando, and I could just drive about 2 hours back to Tampa, but my boss at the time immediately understood. She didn't have to, like, call 911 or anything for me, but what she did do was say, "Hey, this is you go deal with that, and I can handle the rest of the agenda, like, the way you've planned, and then we can touch base when you're in a place to do that," about what the
Yeah.
updates were. So I at least just was able to handle my life situation, and I planned so well for the work situation that she was able to just keep the ball running, but we also had that level of communication that we knew what the plan was, not that we were preparing for any emergencies, but I mean, it happened. So I was able to go deal with that while she was able to keep going, and she didn't scold me or shame me for that. But she
Yeah.
knew I had a young son. She knew I just came back from maternity leave. So these things were bound to happen. I could breathe a little bit
Mhm.
more and then
Mhm.
return back to my job without feeling shame that I left in a moment
Yeah.
that my family needed me.
You know what you've been able to do throughout your career that a lot of other people have probably not been able to do is to build a high level of credibility, right? And I think people, a lot of leaders, they mistake the value of being credible, right?
Mhm.
You have to be credible. Where and given your situation, if you were someone else who wasn't as diligent, who wasn't as on time, who wasn't dependable, right? Your boss may have said something different, or your boss could have felt something different. But the fact that you already had this level of credibility that you've been able to establish throughout your career, it's easier. It's easier. I know some people don't want to hear that. They think that the boss is just supposed to treat everybody the same. I'm telling you, it's not the case. It's just not the case. Listen to me. If you didn't have any credibility with me because you were inconsistent for so long, listen to me, that's a different conversation than I'm having with somebody who's credible. That's just the law of the land. Leadership credibility takes you a lot further. I always say this: your name goes before you. And so anytime I had a leader who wanted to get promoted, my job as their leader was to help them have a really good name, so that way when they were getting interviewed or they were going into a different market to do a project, their name went before them. They're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, Steve sent you. Oh, Steve told me this about you. Steve told me that about you. Da 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 da." Your name goes before you. Think about your name. Think about what you provide for other people. And if it's not great, then you have to do some adjustments.
My way of growing to be credible was, and I didn't even know that's what I was doing at the time. I was just showing up consistently and trying to
Mhm.
anticipate needs, almost to a detriment sometimes where anyway,
Yeah.
I was doing it on the weekends and all. It was living and breathing work where now I'm able to know how to maneuver without having to make it my entire personality and my entire life. So,
Yeah.
how have you seen great retail leaders build credibility, especially in an environment where you're running in and out? There's schedule shifts, there the holiday times, but then there's also just a revolving door of retail leaders.
Yeah, consistency in their behavior. Like I know what I'm going to get when I talk to you. Like The
Yep.
worst thing you can do within the retail space is not know what I'm going to get when I have a conversation with you. Right.
Sure.
And those are scary situations. People will not talk to you. People will keep everything close to the vest. They'll keep all their emotions. They'll keep everything. And the next thing you know, 2 weeks later, Jim is leaving. Well, why is Jim leaving? Well, Jim never felt comfortable enough to talk to you, to have a
Right.
conversation. He didn't feel like he can approach you because you're inconsistent with how you communicate. You're inconsistent with your performance review. You provide this level of detail for this person, but then you do something completely different over here. I can't count how many times I have seen leaders who are inconsistent have horrible turnover, have horrible cultures, and it's just it's mind numbing because it is consistency. Even though it's fast paced, you can still be consistent in a fast paced environment with what you say, with how you deliver messages, understanding your strength. I was never the one to read the operational stuff. They don't, for every quarter, they always have your playbook, right? I was never that person. I was never a person like to sit down and read the whole thing. I had a store manager or a district manager who was that person. Like they would read it, all of it. And I'm like, hey, in the meeting, that's your thing, and they would just go down the line. And I was like, perfect, right? I knew and my team knew that. My team knew that, but they knew that I knew how to direct and guide them so that they can be successful. But they knew that just wasn't one of my strengths. I couldn't stand it. Because there's just too many little tiny details. Listen to me. Do we got talent? Do we got the people in the right place? Are the trucks scheduled right? Do we have a succession plan correct? Okay, good. Let's rock and roll. Let's rock and roll. But I think it's important that you have consistency, because if you don't, no one's going to want to come to you.
If you haven't done the insights test or personality test, it's like I will find it and send it to you because you're like such a red where it's like be brief, be gone, and let's just move, which is just funny to me. There's a few of our people on our team that are that way, and I mean I appreciate it because I know how to like boost it up, but then I also know where I need to change, where I not change, but I know where I don't need to do it all the time. But it's just funnier to me. My colleagues will get it. Um, the other part was about consistency, especially in an unpredictable environment
Yeah.
like events and retail. It even makes even much more sense why being consistent leaves a lasting effect, right? Like you can't control like COVID happening because then now stores are shut down, or events don't happen because now we can't be in person. At least having a consistent person that you know you can rely on, from whether the communication aspect or how they lead or reading the manual, will help be at least the driving force to make whatever next step happen a little smoother. Um, that was my other thought. And my last one was, let's go back to the Ted Lasso comment. I think he provided consistency in an unstable environment, right? Where he walked into his brand came before him. He was a funny, goofy coach, but created
Yeah.
camaraderie. But he also walked into a situation that he had no idea about and
Yeah.
trusted his coach to be the one reading the playbook. But then he was at least just showing up consistently for his team. But you've also seen a lot of Ted Lasso. What have you
Oh,
learned from watching endless episodes?
yeah. Oh man. That show is amazing. There are so many things I've learned from him. Is that Ted will often seem like he doesn't have a plan. You if you listen to him, you see him and you hear him talk, he will say all these different things, and you'll be like, Does this dude have a plan? Are you what is where how are we gonna move this thing forward?" And Rebecca, his boss, is constantly questioning him, and
Mhm.
season 1 and 2, and try to get all these different things out of him. He's like, just sort of trust the process. And I often think sometimes that's a lost art. We over communicate a lot, and the tendency is that we over communicate to show control. We over communicate to show that we have it all under control, that we know what we're doing, we know what we're saying. But I think he did an amazing job of being able to be consistent, but then he would say things when they were needed to be said, and it was like more profound, because he wasn't just always saying the rah 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 speech at every game. He wasn't just patting everybody in the back every game. He just said that, in certain moments, I need to step up and I need to say a certain thing. And then it would really impact people even more. But man, I'm telling you, that show's amazing. There's I don't know, I told you this story about my SVP about communicating out of communicating within your role. We were visiting stores, and I was actually about to get promoted, and so I'm visiting stores with my senior vice president, and we were walking all of these different stores, and he and I actually happened to walk this last store by ourselves. Just he and we had a really good rapport, really good rapport. The store the night before had an inventory. So if you know anything within the retail space, if you have an inventory, the store should be dialed in because that makes the accounting more accurate. So we thought the store was going to be dialed in. We walked in, the store was horrible. The store was horrible. He said, "Steve, what do you think?" So what do you think? He said, "I don't think I could find one good thing to say about this store." And so I was like, "Oh, wow, this is going to be a very interesting recap," right? Because that's what you do. You recap the visits with everybody and the team. And so I remember when we were getting there, I was like, "Oh, Lord, I feel so bad for this store. Like, he's going to crush him. He's going to crush him." And he says this thing. He's a senior vice president, by the way. He says, "You know what? Your brand is off today." And I'm like, "Dude, that's it? That's all you're going to say? That's all you see, your brand is off today." And here's the crazy part, Kayla. Here's the crazy part is that the day after that, everybody was calling me, "Oh my gosh, I heard Samir ripped that store. I heard he just laid into him." I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like,
You weren't at
"No,
the same meeting
we
I
were
was
the
at.
same thing." But the issue was that him saying that your brand was off was equivalent to 2 or 3 levels down, like really ripping into that store. But he communicated out of his position. Like he could have gone into the weeds, but this is what he just said. And I gotta tell you, that was one of the biggest lessons for me was that I had to learn how to give once again the level of communication that situation called for. Not probably what I really wanted to give because I would have probably been just too much for them to handle. So I learned, and I still do this, learn how to give communicatively what that situation calls for. That was just one of my biggest lessons. I think just to parallel that with Ted Lasso, that's what Ted was really gifted at doing.
It's an art. It's an art, and I
Yeah.
don't know how does one develop that to because those words sound very powerful. Also, I would have immediately. It's like the difference between a mom or parent yelling at you and just saying "I'm disappointed," and the kid is like, "Oh my gosh, I felt that in my core." How does one develop that skill set of knowing when to say enough or just enough versus saying more than, or just you know what? I'll take your words. When does someone know how to give the situation what it's called for? Or how do
Yeah.
they develop that talent?
Part of it is experience, and part of it is understanding your audience as well, right? Because if I'm, and I learned this during business development. I did a 2-year stint in business development when I lived here in Atlanta the first time, and I left retail and I started working for a guy Frank Payne. He was a project management guy, and he said, "I want you to run all of U.S. for me for business development," and I said, "Okay," and he taught me that everybody at every level looks at the problem differently. And if I'm able to communicate that for the CEO, the mid manager, the frontline people, if I'm able to communicate effectively how they see the problem, man, I'm going to be winning. And I was able to do that by studying people, understanding what their problems were. And so I was able to take that into my retail career and really just thrive because I knew how to communicate to my CEO what he wanted. I knew how to communicate to my SVP what they wanted and how they saw the problem. And I was able to communicate to the person that took 2 buses to work, right? Because they saw the problem completely different than everybody else, right? So part of it is timing, part of it is understanding your audience, because if you don't understand your audience, you're going to give them too much. You and I, we've seen and been in conferences and I'm like, "That's just too much. You're just giving away too much. Stop talking already." Like, that's just a lot, right? So sometimes we have to be able to slow down, but understand our audience, because Samir could have, my SVP, he could have easily lit into everybody. He was like, "These people," and I know he didn't say this, but he was, "These people are like 5 levels down from me. They're like 5 levels down from me. Like, they don't need me to go in hard on them. I just need to give them how I feel. They can take it with however they want it." And that's what he did. So just takes time and understanding your audience.
Leader. And what a good leader to be able to understand that because I think we've seen different leaders at different levels and even those at SVP levels that are operating in many different ways. One, exactly how he operated, yelling is another, stress, anxiety induced is another pathway, saying nothing and just quietly, happily going around when they know when something is really wrong. But one question you said that, and we've talked about all different types of leaders in this conversation already. In talking about different types of leaders, what do leaders really care about?
The number one thing that any leader needs to understand and have a culture in is that the leader's first and foremost job is to define reality for themselves and then for their team, period. And then we can talk about growth and building trust and things along that line. But I often, people always talk about the definition of leadership and things like that. And is it influence? Is it this? We can have our own variations of it. But for me, it has always been, and I think the best leaders that I've been able to follow have had the ability to define the reality for their team. And to your point around like walking around like thinking everything's great and to, think everything's rosy, like I've had leaders who were very brutally honest with the circumstances. But that made me trust them more was because they weren't honest with what was happening. And then the second part of that, once you define reality for yourself and for your team, you have to show them the role that they play in that situation, whether it's going and how their role is going to help move it forward. Because the tendency is that we just, if it would be great if I give you the reality of the situation and then if I walk out the room, then you're like, well, what the hell? Like,
What does
what
that mean for
happened?
me?
Yeah, yeah. You feel great
How do I
because I
help
was
with
able to be.
that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Good luck with that. You feel great because I was able to define reality, right? That's great. But then you leave these people in the lurch. Like, what are they going to do? How do you help them? How do you help them navigate the circumstances? And so defining reality, but then also showing people their role in which to play in the growth, a new direction of the company or project. Like those two things for me are just so super important. Those are the two foundational things. And you could talk about all the other stuff afterwards, but if you're able to do those two things consistently, I think that was always sort of my secret sauce when I was able to take over a new role was that I didn't mince words. I was like, "Hey, the market isn't great, and these are the things that we need to work on." I'm not gonna come in here and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna pick this great thing that we do here. We pick this great thing." Like, no, here's the reality of where we are. Now, here's how I need your help. Okay, great. Then we can move forward.
I just to touch on that, why aren't leaders always honest in these moments? Because it could feel like there's information that people are assuming or speculating, and if someone was just honest, and maybe they're not able to be, which is I won't give the answer for you. But,
No.
I mean, it feels like if you were just honest with me, you could know how to operate in the situation. I can do whatever you need or move in a XYZ fashion, but if I don't know, I'm just left to my own devices.
Yeah.
Why can't leaders always be honest in those moments? Or
And even though I say that, right, there are moments where um I wasn't able to provide everything. And here's, the old saying, it's lonely at the top as a leader. And
mhm,
partly because there's so much information that you're privy to that your team isn't privy to. And there were so many times in my career where I was privy to so many situations that while I really wanted to tell the team, I wasn't able to, whether it's talent wise, operationally, certain things. Sometimes I did tell them because I knew that was going to impact their job and their role. Like, hey, you may need to start looking for something. Right. I probably went against the code, but I didn't care because I wanted to respect my team and who they were and what they and their contribution. And if it was going to really truly impact them in a certain way, then I sometimes I did let them know. But I think partly is because there are a lot of decisions that probably still need to take place before you can provide all of the details. So when I say define reality, I think it's partly because you have the ability to define the reality. You have sort of the go ahead to do that. In certain circumstances, you probably won't have because there are other shoes that need to drop, other opportunities that need to take place before you can actually share a lot of the information. Some leaders, however, will take that to the umpteenth degree, and they just don't provide any type of information where they do have the ability to do that. So those are leaders that sometimes aren't trusted.
it's just situational, the type of person, but who you can be. I would say the recommendation is to be so that you have that approachability and that relationship building with your teams, which makes perfect sense. All right, I have a few questions and I want to do this rapid fire, real talk, last round. Um,
Did you see
are you
I'm drinking
ready?
out of my Stanley?
I don't even have mine with me. Of all the times to not have my stomach with me.
It's an inside joke, everybody, because Kayla has
It
like 10 of
is.
these,
I
and
only have one.
I would make fun of her all the time. Anytime there was a Stan Lee display around, I would do this, and I'd send her a picture. So, yeah.
That I yes, you have, and that one suits you. Mine is the 40-ounce ones, and I only have one for the record. Although I do peruse Hydro Jug and Stanley often to see if I need another one. I don't, but anyway. Oh, cool. Alright. Alright, so rapid fire, what comes to mind first on these topics? So one is
Mhm.
baptism by fire approach when it comes to leadership. You send a new employee in, figure it out. Thoughts on that?
It all depends. This one's really depends. I've done it a lot. I've done it a lot, but I
Okay.
realize that I once again, my ability to understand people quickly lets me know what they can handle. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm actually a proponent of it in certain situations, definitely, because you got to learn it. And if you don't, you're not gonna learn in a green store. Like this is what we would talk in Target terms, red, yellow, and green. No, you're not gonna learn a lot in a green store. If you, I need to send you to a red store for you to understand like what needs to take place. So yeah.
makes sense. Alright, what's one leadership mistake you'll never repeat again?
Oh my gosh, taking for granted that I got it, right? My buddy and I, we were both going up for a role. They flew us actually into Long Island, and we were to visit like 3 stores in Long Island, and we were supposed to report back. I mean, I didn't take it seriously. I didn't take that situation seriously. My buddy did. I just thought I had the role. I just thought I had opportunity. Da da da. Da. And he ended up getting the role. He ended up getting the role. I didn't. I didn't. And he deserved it. He deserved it. So that lesson there taught me I was too much of a 3 at that point. Yeah, yeah. I over-indexed my 3-ness.
When a 3 goes too far.
Yes.
Well, it's a humbling moment. And this may be one and the same, but a moment from your retail experience that shaped you.
Oh my gosh, I got a whole bunch.
You have
I'm
a
trying to
Rolodex. Pick
Yeah,
one.
that shaped me. My boss, Jim Hogan at the time. Yeah, I was in the car with him, and I was in Boston at the time. It was living in Boston. We're in the car. We're talking. I say, "Hey, give me like secrets to success. What's the secret to success, like within retail?" And he told me this. He said, "Steve, develop and export great talent." He didn't tell me about numbers. He didn't talk about profit and all that. He said, "Develop and export great talent." Meaning develop them and send them out to other markets. And because that's what he did. And it's probably some of the best pieces of advice that I've had because it made me laser focus on succession planning, which is something I love to talk about, and then making sure that I'm developing people in the way that they could survive in other markets, not just in this market, but you have to be able to survive in another market. So those were some of my, and that's probably one of the biggest moments that I've had in my career.
You seem to have had such great leaders that have shaped and like molded your experience, which is such a gift. Not
Mm,
everyone gets that. So I just noticed that. I want to
yeah.
point that out. All right. Big, not big. What's one leadership book that you recommend to everyone or that everyone should
Oh,
read?
Execution by Larry Bossidy
Execution.
and Ram Charan. Anything by Peter Drucker, Executive Leadership by him. I am and you already know this, I'm an old school leadership book person. Late 90s, early 2000s for me are like some of the best leadership books. Tom Peters, I think that's like early 70s or early 80s. Like to me, those were some of the best leadership books. They didn't have all these buzzwords that we have nowadays in a lot of these leadership books. It was just core leadership stuff. Yeah, Execution by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan is one I highly recommend.
I'll link it in the show notes so that everyone can read it too, because I've never even heard of that one. So thank you for sharing that. And then
Yeah.
one thing that you do for you outside of work for fun. So you said you claim weekends, right? We're not working on weekends. What are we doing for fun on the weekend?
Yeah, I used to play a lot of golf, and I haven't, and I need to get back. Well, the weather's not permitting. Well, in Atlanta, it's not that bad. I am, and you already know this. I'm a massive soccer fan. So a lot of times, I'm watching just a lot of football, soccer, or however I call it football because the rest of the world calls it football. And I love it. I love the strategy. I love to see something played at such a high level. It's amazing what these players do, how the coaches set up their teams, how the other coaches will set up their team to combat what um what the first team with like their strengths. It's just like it's like a game of chess that's being played with like the players. And I can see it like from one half to the next where the coaches will change up their strategy. I'm like, oh, he did this and this and that. I get on sharing nerves with all of that stuff. But yeah, I just love that's something that I kind of do for myself. And I also play a little FIFA. I can't play physically. I suck physically like with soccer, but I can play FIFA. I'm really good at that. So
I was like, we've gotten the passion topic. Forget retail leadership because he's talking with his hands. He's ready. He's in the game. You said earlier, leadership is leadership. What did you mean by that?
I think there's so many different definitions, of it. I think what I meant by that is I think we have seen enough of what good leadership looks like, and we've been able to see enough of what bad leadership looks like. Right? It's almost, I don't know why this is such a gross analogy, but I remember, and this is just some people of my age will remember this, but it was the Supreme Court, and they were trying to outlaw certain type of website, um, triple X type of websites. And I was like, well, can you define it? And the guy's like, you know what? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, meaning that it's the wrong thing, right? So it was a Supreme Court judge that said that. And I feel like leadership, we've almost taken into, I know what really good leadership looks like. And I know what really bad leadership looks like. And I don't think we need, definitions, anymore per se. Does that make sense? Because leadership is leadership. We've been around this world long enough to understand what really good leadership looks like and what bad leadership just is. And, you can bring out names if you want all of that stuff, but for me, I think people know what really good leadership is and what it's not.
I wonder if that's the case anymore because I
I
I mean,
know.
is it? I mean, maybe globally, maybe, but day to day, I don't know.
I think people I think I don't know. I often think sometimes with what people think about leadership, a lot of times it's based off of their own personal shortcomings and some of the things that they haven't been able to accomplish in their lives or to say in their lives or to do in their lives. And so they may cling on to a certain type of leader or a certain type of mantra or whatever it may be. Either at this point in time, you either have to double down on that belief system and whatever it is that what you want to do, or you have to critically think, right? I think I sent you that on like a little Instagram. It was like Instagram. There was a comedian saying, like, there was this one thing that we used to do back in the 80s. It's crazy. I can't believe I'm going to tell you this. Like we used to it was called critical thinking. It's like you would take one opinion over here, you take another opinion over here, and then guess what you would do? You would make up your own opinion. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so wild nowadays. But it's sort of true, And that's where I say where some people are just willing to just stick here. They're not willing to look at anything else. And the best leaders have the ability to understand when they're wrong, understand once again what the situation calls for. But people who are following them sometimes are just it's out of some personal, I think issue that they may have that they haven't been fulfilled yet.
Makes sense. I think it's so nuanced. It's also based on, as you said earlier, everyone brings their own situation,
Hmm.
baggage, emotional life into an environment, especially at work. And also their perspectives are different. The way they see situations are different. And person that's driving the bus to the store versus those that are sitting in a corner office. There's so many different ways that one can view what leadership looks like and have that experience for themselves. That's I think the hard part about leadership is that it's not very black or white. Like it can be for some people, but for some
Hmm.
others, it's baked into the nuance of their own day to day.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. This is why the world we're living in right now doesn't allow for time or introspection, right? Is how do we move from one thing to the next very
Mhm.
quickly. And you don't have a lot of time to analyze, to research. And so, because we are getting inundated, it doesn't matter the social media platform, we are just getting inundated by quick snips of thought leadership or this and that or whatever it may be. And we don't analyze anymore. Once again, and we don't take the time to understand who we are anymore. We sort of push ourselves into, I think, some measures of like what's expedient right now as a leader. What's the new leadership way? What's the new leadership thing to do? And trends and stuff like that, they're not going to last. They don't last. Like really good leadership stands the test of time. This is why I talk about those old books, right? Because those books, some of the best leaders in the world still read those books because they're not tainted by social media. They're not tainted by expedience. They're real grounded ideas. And so I think as a leader, you have to be able to have some grounded ideas of who you are and what you're going to stand for. Because if you don't, then doesn't matter the circumstances, right? And I think I had several leaders that actually told me that in the context of you didn't matter who came to you, you stood your ground. I would often say, is like, people want to talk to me about something or somebody else or boss. I'm like, have you had that conversation with them first? Like, well, no. Okay, well, don't talk to me about it then. You need to have that conversation with them. That was always one of my things. And so I think nowadays people are so eager to hear, what did Kayla say? Who just said that? Stop all of that. Stop. Ground yourself in who you are as a leader, and then you're able to move forward.
Amazing mic drop moment that I will be clipping and sending to you later. But I think that's what it stems from, though, really. It's knowing yourself and being able to really sit with that and be honest and transparent and then be able to guide that going forward. So I know we can talk for hours
I
and
know, man.
it could be a 5-hour podcast episode. Um, or mini series on Netflix maybe one day. But I do something also from an audience segment standpoint or
Yep.
audience engagement standpoint where I have the guest, especially someone that's not in the event space, ask the event professionals a question. It could be about leadership, it can be about production and events itself. So, what is your question that you
Mhm.
have to share with the Event Pro audience?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, you didn't prepare me for this.
Says the
Um,
person that wrote, like, dad in the form. Right? Yes. You're
that
like, "Let me
was
just"
what was the one question you asked me in the form, and I was like, "I'm that guy," or something like that. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I think it was like your bio,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
was like, bio, a few sentences about you, and you're like, "I'm that guy," and I'm like, "Cool, I'm gonna post that everywhere."
Oh, wow. When I think about my pros and and what they have to deal with, I often think about, the number of stakeholders that they have to deal with and the number of stakeholders that they have to please, and whatever that may mean within a project. I would just probably ask them the same question that we've been talking to, like, or what is your what specific problem does your leadership solve? Within that project, within that company, because I think the more you understand that, the less people pleasing you become, and you're able to sort of stand your ground and have conversations out of that groundedness, if that makes sense. Because I
Mhm.
think, when you have a lot of stakeholders to quote unquote please, we just try to give them every little piece of who we are, and then you shred who you are, and you end up, feeling burnt out and not, you don't feel like you may be providing, the right ideas or information. But I think understanding who you are, what problem you specifically solve, then you can sort of continue to direct the stakeholders and provide your information to the best of your knowledge. But I think just really, do you understand like what specific problem your leadership solve?
That's a great question, especially for this audience because event pros tend to, depending on, I would say, the subject matter area that they're
Hmm.
focused on, but for the most part, to tend to be jack of all trades. So it
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
feel like I have to be the best at everything from banquet event orders. Banquet event orders, like what is on that? How do I order the best catering? The
Hmm.
production, is that exactly where it needs to be so that the speakers have the microphones and they know how to work it and are there for rehearsal? Sometimes you have to be in charge of everything, but it's a great moment to empower those on your team
Yeah.
to lead those opportunities. But sometimes you don't have a team. Sometimes it's you and you're just
Hmm.
relying on vendors to be that voice of expertise. So I think it's a really empowering question for the event pros to answer and really have some introspection of like, where's my zone of genius when it
Yeah.
comes to event production, event planning, event design, because there's a lot that can go into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Our time is coming to a close because I know you're very busy and I really just even appreciate you doing this.
No, I'm stoked. I'm excited.
I think the audience is going to get a lot out of this. We packed a lot into this conversation. So, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing? How can they learn more about leadership, especially if it's something that they want to get into? Tell the audience all the things.
Yeah. LinkedIn is always the best spot. You can see everything I do there. I post a lot over there. Or if you want to visit the website, worthyretail.com. And those are definitely the two spots that you can connect with me on. Kayla, I just gotta say, I don't care. Start crying. I am so proud of you. I know, I mean, I'm trying not to get emotional myself. I'm so proud of you. Um, the woman, the leader, the mom, the wife that you've become, and then taking on this challenge of being a podcast host and helping a very specific audience that needs it, right? And that's the one thing about you. You understand the needs of other people. And sometimes you put those needs ahead of yourself. And so I know that everybody who's listening to this is going to get so much out of it because you're giving and putting all of your heart and soul into this because you care about the audience. You care about who they are, what they do, and then who they're becoming. So yeah. So I just wanted to let you know I'm extremely proud of you.
Thank you for that. I thank you for that. I do care. I care a lot. And I'm excited to have you on because I think a lot of why I did this was because I had a lot of also great mentors and people that I've met along the way and new people I've met that have given me so much information that I'm like, "Oh, why doesn't the world have this?
Yeah,
And they should have this. And know these amazing people and just also learn from it so that they can grow themselves. So I hope if there's anything that everyone takes away, it's that from every episode. And
yeah,
before I keep crying or start crying, thank you for spending your time and doing this.
yeah.
I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anytime, anytime.